Tonight, we will be delving into 6 stories with different topics and different writing styles. From stories involving watchtowers, rituals, monsters, night drives, and more. A huge thank you to the writers for allowing me to share their stories. Remember, you can send in your own story to rylhstories@gmail.com. Please remember to drop a like if you enjoy, as it really does help out the channel. Subscribing if you're new is also very much appreciated. Enjoy the video. And as always, I hope you all have a great night. I am looking at my town from up above, again, like I've been doing for the past 26 years as the sun is setting. How beautiful and isolated it seems from up here, covered in red, all the shit happening on a daily basis, the way people are there. None of it exists here. I don't exist here. All that there is the setting sun, beautiful ocean, blues shining red, and my small town. I could probably stand here all night, all day, all my goddamn life, which will most likely be the case. Let me tell you about me then, since you asked. I'm Benjamin. My surname? Why in the world would you need it? Well, fine. It's Benjamin Sterling. Not like it matters. I was born here in this town, and lived here my whole life. I'm 26. Well, I graduated from high school here, and started working for my uncle in his little bookshop. I never went to college. What do you mean, why? Why are you asking this anyway? Just don't stand there with that look on your face and judge me, okay? It's not like I couldn't do it. I just didn't want to. Look, I am not like that, okay? Ever since I was little, nothing ever made sense. I look around and I saw those people, living, in a way. Some had reasons to move out of this place, like my friend Charles. Some lived to just live, like my uncle. Or lived to keep themselves and their families fed, like my father. And that is it. They just lived, in a way. Kept along with whatever was happening, from work to house, for the Friday football matches and stuff. They lived. They had a reason, or some sort of a flow or something. But not me. Wait, come again? Oh, nice question. Well, I didn't really do anything different than others. I mean, I was friends with Charles since I was a small kid. He kinda dragged me into whatever he was doing, and I was pretty much okay with whatever was going on. I played football with him when we were kids. I hanged around with those guys and started smoking with them. I took those silly haunted house bets, unlike him. And I almost went to college with him. So I guess you don't want me to get to that story yet? Okay, whatever. Charles was not like me. He, as I said before, had reasons. He wanted to make something out of his life. He had a keen mind, and he understood those machines. He wanted to be an engineer. He'd really make a nice engineer. His personality? He was the polar opposite of shy. So much that outgoing would be an understatement. He made friends with literally everyone in the entire goddamn town. Yet our friendships bound never broke. I don't know what it was that made us special. I believe, for his case, he was always someone to those he was with. He took different forms in different groups. And if those two groups were to collide, he'd make a great mixture of those personalities. No, I don't mean it like he was a sociopath. He actually enjoyed it. It was not wearing masks on and off for him. He actually enjoyed this. He got something special out of every relationship he had. All brought joy to him. He was not playing make-believe. He was being himself. And, well, when it comes to us, he wasn't someone like that. I don't know, that is quite hard to explain. Think of it like this. Let's say that you have these cool shoes that you like. You wear them outside every day, feeling confident and happy with your shoes. But whenever you return home and you take your shoes off, that is the greatest comfort you can get. And to him, I was like getting home and taking his shoes off. His words, not mine. Yeah, I think you can reckon the kind of person he is from what I've just said. Social, outgoing, and... How was he with me? Well, to be perfectly honest, I'm not sure how to respond to it. His character and his sense of humor didn't change much, but it was more relaxed. Like he didn't have to pick words or act a certain way around me, and that was it. Natural is all I can say without lying to you. This is harder to respond to. As I said, I never wanted anything to do with my life. Charles knew it. And out of literally everyone in this town, he was the only one to respect it. So I guess there is that. And in a way, he intrigues me. He is everything that I avoid being. He tries so very hard to be. More than anyone I have ever seen. And he does this in a in-flow way. What I mean is... Now, this will be confusing. He does not try hard to try hard. It comes to him naturally. Yes, exactly. We were both in peace with ourselves and each other in a way. So, is that it? You get all you want about Charles and I? Oh, this place? Wait, how do you know it was important to us? Fine, I don't really want to know. This place has been our favorite spot since, I don't even know. I remember that I was young, and I had always heard the stories of this watchtower being empty for a long time. Everyone thought it was dangerous, so it had always remained that way. Having been bored of people for the time being, I decided to go visit this place to be lonely. On the road, I saw Charles. He asked me what I was doing, and I said, going up on that watchtower to be alone. He asked, can I come? And I said, sure. I think this explains our relationship pretty well. The watchtower was built on the edge of a cliff facing our town, so it took about an hour to climb there. When I finally climbed the cliff and the watchtower, as I was standing on the porch of the watchtower facing my town, the sun was setting. It was beautiful. Outside of everything I had ever seen, my whole town, the lives we were living, everything was right there, under the cliff, a small glowing piece of land. So I sat there and watched the sun set. So did Charles. I think we were 9 then. So that place became our place in a way. Every day, just before the sun set, I'd come up here and watch. Just watch. Charles? He'd come here with me. He'd sometimes write poems to a girl he was seeing at the time and ask for my advice, or he'd bring his homework and ask for my help, or he'd just hang around with me. Maybe whine about his day, or quite simply chat about something. It changed. He was not interested in this view as I was. All I ever brought here were cigarettes and beer every once in a while, while Charles did all sorts of things here. You really want me to explain? Okay. One time I got up here and caught him screwing his girlfriend. I told him that I couldn't quite focus on the scenery while people were banging behind me, and his girlfriend said the same, but the other way around. So we made an agreement. He could do anything he wanted here on Wednesdays, and I wouldn't come up here on Wednesdays. But other days, he couldn't bring someone to bang, and I could be here in peace. Yeah, he was like that. A little too social in a way. He probably brought many girls here over a period of 9 or so years, and dated even more. Me? I had a relationship or two, but I guess no one could really respect me in a way. Or respect that I just couldn't be interested in things that like others would be. Well, yes and no. The watchtower has real value to me. It was built for fire lookouts to observe the woods lying behind us, but it was abandoned due to being placed in a dangerous place. So it sees over the woods on the other side, and it sees my town from here. Built to be useful, but left behind. I kinda connect to this watchtower, you know? Most days, when I am done working, I come here with a bottle of beer and enough cigarettes, enjoy the view, and leave when it's dark. It feels nice here, in this place. What? That was sudden. Well, when I think back to it, his father's death changed him in a way I couldn't fathom. When his father died, he was in college, as an engineering student. When he came back, he was really upset. Of course, who wouldn't be? And then, in the days after his return, he changed a lot. He was not merely living his loss, it was something else. He seemed burdened, in a way I'd never seen him before. But I figured it was normal because he had to freeze college, and work to keep his mother and his little sister fed. After a while, he accepted the situation, and became the social, outgoing person he was again. But something was different. You know when I said that thing about taking off your shoes and all that? Well, he wasn't like that anymore. It is like he was still wearing a personality when he was around me, and hiding whatever was going on inside of him. This was not normal, not even after what he had gone through. I didn't mind it. I didn't mind it for years. I guess it was a mistake. The Wednesday rule was sort of vague and situational once. Before college, he'd mostly say stuff like, "Oh, it's okay. Julie's with her parents this Wednesday. You can go to the Watchtower." On Wednesdays, so I'd be up there for the whole week. However, after his father's death, it all changed. No Benjamin on Wednesdays rule became strict. He said that he really needed his time alone up here every once in a while, so I was not allowed up on Wednesdays. I was, for the most part, okay with that. I didn't really care. I wish I did. I wish I actually acted every once in a while and helped him. Well, let's talk about today then. I finished work early and was quite bored of everything about it. How people act in certain situations sometimes drives me insane. And it was one of those days. And I knew I wouldn't be safe from it in my rental flat because it was involving my flatmates and, the long story short, I really needed to be on my Watchtower for a while. I knew it was Wednesday, but I figured it wouldn't hurt. And to my fortune, the Watchtower was empty for real. It was merely minutes before the sundown, and I had my beer in my hand. So I was in a relatively good mood. Then I looked at my town and thought of something peculiar. It was doomed to die, eventually. Young people were escaping this town in every way possible, leaving no next generation to look after it. Hell, in a few years, there were many cases of 20-something girls disappearing without any notice. I knew the dreams of a wealthy city was killing this town, and eventually those cities would die too, and then the countries, then the earth itself, and the sun. Everything was in a slow state of slowly fading away, starting from the smallest possible particles to everything in general, always fading. Yet there I was, standing on a fading watchtower, as a fading man, looking at a fading town, glowing beautifully under the fading sun. That is when I heard a female scream come from behind me. It was sudden, and was cut short. I looked behind. The woods. It came from the woods. There was a side of me telling me to mind my own business. The side that has been controlling me for a long time. But I figured, if someone was hurt or injured, and I didn't help, that would make things even harder for me in the future. So I decided the best action to do was to actually look, and see if someone was hurt. Don't give me that look. I know how shitty of a person I can be. At least I tried to help, didn't I? Doesn't that count as a good deed in society? Well, to be honest, you look like you'd know even less about it, and I'm sure you are not interested in what I think about this topic. You seem to be only interested in the story and its details. Okay. I heard the voice. I decided to look for the source. The woods here are thick, so I was expecting a long search. But instead, I'd found a fresh trail, which seemed to be opened by two humans. I followed it, and I found, to be perfectly honest, I am still not sure how to describe the scenery, but that is how I saw it. First, I saw Charles, and a girl who was laying down. Then I saw blood, spiraling out of her, and the bloody knife in Charles' hand. Then, I noticed she was floating on something. Yes, floating. She was literally touching nothing, except her spiraling blood landed on that thing she was floating above. Then I saw that something to be brown rock, filled with sigils drawn in red. I did not know any of the sigils there, so I can't tell much about them. After that, I noticed something even odder than the floating girl. Her body seemed frozen. Not as in frozen in ice, frozen in time and space. Her eyes were moving, and they read of panic. She was afraid, looking at me, then at Charles, probably hoping I came to save her. Other than her eyes, everything was completely frozen though. Her hair wasn't moving. Her body wasn't even twitching or anything, but the cuts in her stomach were gushing blood. That blood wasn't spilling right, as I said before. It was spiraling down in perfectly formed string-like way. It's hard to explain. Just at that moment, as I was observing one of the strings and how blood seemed frozen in time and perfectly liquid at the same time, my eyes met with Charles. Just then, I thought to myself, oh, So that is the face he's been hiding from me. Ben? He said, with a voice cold and distant as one of a serial killer. What are you doing here? I arched my right foot slowly to the right and slowly moved the dirt beneath my foot to the middle. I was on the Watchtower and I heard screams. I told him, which was the truth. Why are you here? It's Wednesday. I stopped for a moment. I wasn't expecting this. He sighed. At that moment, he seemed more tired than ever. I did the same action as before with the left side of my right foot. Now that you know what I've been doing, what are you gonna do? I looked at the girl floating, then I looked at Charles. I don't know. It was the truth, and he knew it. He searched my eyes with his, looking for a clue. He was thinking, calculating. What am I gonna do? I moved some dirt from behind my foot as well. It was a genuine question. I answered honestly. I don't know. He was now looking at the ground, as if he gave up. I thought for a second he'd drop the knife, get to a fetal position, and start crying. But he didn't. He held his knife harder, broadened his stance, and looked at me with the eyes of a desperate man. Desperate, yet determined. I'm sorry, Ben, he said. It was the truth, and I knew it. He started rushing towards me. Charles is taller than me. He works out quite a lot, and he has been in many fights. Me, on the other hand, I'm not badly shaped, yet I am not much compared to him, so it's possible to say that I was afraid for my life at that point. And I did what I had to do. Before he was too close, I flung my right foot towards him, and with it the dry dirt I collected underneath. Blinded, he still rushed, but he was holding his eyes with his left hand and swinging his knife with the other one. I dodged to the right and started rushing the hell away from him, hoping to get to town and to safety before he caught me. That is when I noticed that I was actually running deeper into the forest. I also noticed wetness on my left arm, realizing that one of his blind swings had hit me. I wasn't bleeding too much, and the blood wasn't spiraling into a stone, so I figured I'd be fine. But Charles proved me otherwise. Before I knew it, he tackled me to the ground, and I was underneath the giant who was trying to murder me with a knife. I started jerking, doing my very best to get out of the position I was in. The knife landing right next to my head, somehow, made me focus harder. I held his hand as he tried to take the knife off the ground, and now we were struggling. Him to get the knife back into a comfortable position to murder me, and I for my dear life. You don't understand, he shouted right above me. After my father, it was my mission to feed it. Even though it was probably not the best time to talk for us, I played along. Feed what? He needs blood. Not just any blood. A young female's blood. And if I don't complete the ritual soon, he will... In the meantime he was talking, my left hand searched for a suitable rock, found it, and bashed his face with it. He was now on my right, crawling in pain. I started running again. When I was back at the small opening, the one that includes a floating half-dead girl and a weird stone sucking all the blood spilling, spiraling out of her, I heard a cry from behind. Benjamin! Adrenaline dulled my brain, and I rushed with all I had. Then I saw her desperate eyes, looking at me, begging for help. I stopped. God damn it, I stopped. Normally, as you must have noticed by now, I am not the kind of person that likes others, or does things for others more than he has to. But I guess somehow, we all have an idiotic sense of empathy placed in all of us, and mine made me want to help her. I tried lifting her. It didn't work. She wasn't floating. She was stuck somehow. Then I tried cutting the blood spirals with a swift karate chop. Of course it didn't work. Then I tried kicking the stone. She hovered a little. Must be a good sign, I murmured to myself, and raised my right leg back to land a nice kick. No! I instinctively looked right. Charles was standing there, panting. His eyes were bloody. He was bleeding from the head. Ben, stop. Please. You don't understand. I didn't say anything. Me, my father, his father before him, many generations of men in my family. He was panting hard. We have to do it, okay? Every once in 40 or so years, this thing becomes hungry. and we feed it with what it desires. Blood of young women. My empathy senses must have been working well, because I could feel the floating girl panicking. And it doesn't want much, only 6 or so in every 40 years. When it feels fed, the signs on it, they stop glowing in red and it goes back to sleep. To be honest, I was curious at this point. What if you don't feed it? Don't know. But I don't think I want to know. He had a point. The thing froze a girl in space, for crying out loud. So, Benjamin, please, my old friend. He was taking deep breaths with every pause. Please, just go. Pretend this didn't happen. Just watch your sunset like you always do. Forget this ever happened. This is the last victim for 40 years. I swear. The signs are cooling off. Just don't care about this. You never did care about anything anyway. What if another girl who everyone will forget about dies? What would you care? Every fiber in my body agreed to it. Every neuron in my brain agreed with Charles. I was more than willing to leave everything behind. But the girl, and her eyes glowing in fear. God fucking damn empathy. I kicked the stone as Charles was shouting. The girl hovered intensely. Then she fell on the ground. Before she did, the stone rumbled into many tiny pieces. I looked at Charles again, half expecting him to be rushing at me. But he was just standing on his knees, tired. He didn't know what was to come, but he was too tired to care properly. I looked at the girl, the blood spiraling back into her from within the tiny pieces of stone. She looked at me, her words barely audible. She said, "Thank you." I smiled a little. Then she floated erect like a fucking robot, and her eyes started glowing red with anger. It was a horrifying scream that sounded more as if it was coming from a bear. She looked at Charles. These words also sounded like they were coming from a bear, rather than a human. I was deeply scared, yet unable to move. She floated right next to him. He was still standing on his knees. She gripped Charles' throat. He wasn't in any way scared. He had already accepted his fate. He was ready to be killed by the very monster he was not able to feed. But I am sure he was not ready for what came next. She just exploded. Yes, exploded. 1 second, she is there. Next, there's a goop of human skin, blood, organs, and bones everywhere. It was inhumanly disgusting. But Charles laughed. I'm okay. Thank God. I'm okay. The laugh was probably strengthened by his stress relief. Oh my God, Ben. We're actually okay. I'm sorry for what happened. It is just... Then, he exploded too. I fell to the ground. And I was too scared to ever get up. I was standing where Charles used to be. It was even more goop. I was afraid to the bone. I was afraid of blowing up like them. But then, I heard something talk inside of me. You will make a good vessel. Before I was able to comprehend what was going on, I started losing control. It's hard to explain, but I can try. At first, I felt as if my blood just became honey, or something as dense. It was as if it was not moving. My heart cried, trying to pump the dense liquid that was supposed to be my heart. It hurt like hell for a couple of seconds, but then my heart got used to it somehow, and after that, I lost my sight completely. I was not seeing darkness. No, what I saw was red. As in the greatest color of anger red. Then I started thinking that way too. I felt angry at everyone and everything. I wanted to murder people, but I did not know why. And as my thoughts and my knowledge were driven into a dark, no, a red corner inside of my own brain, I knew. The thing that took control of me was angry. Angry that it was trapped here, in this world. He was angry that he had to sleep for so long. He wanted revenge. He wanted death. He smelled the people down below. He would start his life in his new body by butchering the people here. He started moving. He needed vision to see where he'd go first, so he climbed the first thing he saw fit. As this was happening, again, I was merely a visitor, a person trapped inside of a monster and inside his own body. Everything felt distant. All my senses were as if they were lost. I couldn't think, I couldn't move, I couldn't do anything. Then followed a similar cue. Something so very familiar, so I followed it. The monster tried stopping me, but I was already out of his trap. I was in control again. Then I noticed the cue that made me get back to myself. It was the sun setting, and I was on the Watchtower again. And hey, the beer I left was still cold, so I started drinking it. I knew the monster was angry, and knew I wouldn't be able to contain him forever. But I didn't mind. Not at that point. I just watched the sunset. What do you mean what happened next? You already know the rest. You came here and asked me what I was doing. Then that's... I don't know. I mean, I noticed the sun hasn't moved for a while, so I was hoping you had the powers to bring it out of me. But yeah, I believe I was hoping a little too much. So that means I have to do what is right. I don't know how, or I don't know why. But I know that the monster is bound to me now. If I die, he dies too. And he wasn't able to change my body enough to make it his own. A fall from this height will still kill me. And with me, he'll die too. So I guess all I can do is, well, die. Oh, so you agree with my choice. How noble. Okay, as my dying wish, I'd like to know who you are. To be honest, I'm quite intrigued at this moment. Oh my, that's quite interesting. So you just collect? So you're some sort of thief then? I guess this makes me the Joker in this scenario. Fitting. Unfortunately, there is truly no way out of here. Not for me. Not like this. It isn't funny how a person like me, who lived his life as if it meant nothing, now sees the true value of it all. The sacrifice I'm about to make. Of the life I could have lived. Of those that I have lost. Of the person I could have been. Well, it is too late now. The sun is moving again, and I feel the monster trying its hardest to get my body back. Oh, you are gone. I see. Well, no time to waste then. Goodbye, cruel world. I guess. It happened. The thing I had been waiting for my whole life. I was happy, finally. At a glance, it was a typical Tuesday morning, but I knew that it was much more than that. It was the day I was set free, my 18th birthday. Everyone in my family had to go through the same ritual at this age, a ceremony. It was about becoming a new person and being freed. I was excited for mine because I wanted to get out of our town. It was boring and I had no friends. Well, barely any. I couldn't forget about Sophia, my classmate in school. Since it was a small town and I was introverted, she was the only friend I had. It had been that way since kindergarten. In our town, we all practiced the same religion. It's a small town, so it made sense for the founders, I guess. Some people would call it a cult, and I agree. I didn't think it was a bad thing though, just a thing. Not many people know about us or our practices, so I'm risking everything to even put this online. I know the beginning of this story may sound happy. I mean, I was happy, for once in my life, but it took a much darker turn the night of the ceremony. The younger kids were never allowed to watch the ritual before it was their turn, so I had no idea what it was going to be like. I expected something casual. I mean, our religious practices were always pretty casual, nothing too over the top. So you can imagine I was not expecting what I saw when I walked outside that night. Torches lined the path to a well, surrounded by the townspeople, all wearing black robes. I felt a bit underdressed in my t-shirt and jeans. Nobody had told me to wear anything else. But that was the least of my worries. A newborn child sat at the edge of the well, wailing. I ran over to her just as she started to fall into it. I caught her and held her close to my chest. I wasn't sure what was happening, but I knew it wasn't going to be good. The baby was still crying as I caressed the top of her head to try and calm her. I looked around with disgust at the figures in the robes. That's when one of them tossed me something. It shined in the torch's light, and when I looked closer, I could see my reflection in it. A cleaver. I slowly put the pieces together. and by then, I was mad. I held the child closer to me as tears streamed down my face. "What is this? What do you want from me?" I screamed. Their hoods blocked the light from shining on their faces, so I couldn't see who they were exactly. All I know is that they all started telling me what to do at once, their voices overlapping. The child cried louder at the sound, and I hugged her tight. My feet started moving before my brain could fully process what was happening. I ran past the crowd, into the forest, and didn't stop to breathe until I could no longer hear them shouting for me. I still held the child close to my chest as I walked through the trees, desperately trying to find a way out. I finally came across the road that leads out of town, and followed it until I saw a sign that read, "Now leaving, town name. Come back soon." I waited with the child at this point, knowing full well that I would never be back. I stroked and kissed the top of her head until she fell asleep, and stood, leaning on the sign, for what seemed like hours before a car drove past. The family stopped for me and I got in their car, and explained to them what I had just run away from. They seemed understanding, and in a rush to get out of there. They brought us to their house, and let us sleep in their guest room. Now it's just me and this baby here, and I don't know what to do. This family was nice enough to understand my situation, but I guess we'll talk more in the morning. I don't even know how to care for a baby, but as I have learned from the past, the future is unpredictable, and you'll never know where you are going to end up. My uncle is a police officer. He typically does highway patrol, and he doesn't talk about work a lot because it's both mundane and unpleasant, and it's very rare that something amusing happens. No one wants to hear about fatal accidents and speeding stops. They want to hear the story about the drunken college student who couldn't remember how to put his pants back on in the middle of an intersection during morning rush hour. Unfortunately, the funny stories are few and far between, so mostly he doesn't say anything. When I turned 16, my uncle had me drop by the police station, ostensibly to pick something up from my mom. It was a ruse. I found myself confronted by a number of his co-workers, who took me aside and had the talk with me. 2 talks, actually. One about going off to college in a few years, and the dangers I would face, and to never leave my drink unattended, and don't walk around by myself after dark, blah blah blah. The other was about driving. Cell phones weren't in heavy use at the time, so they didn't talk about texting, but it did warn me against having a lot of noisy friends in the car, always wearing a seatbelt, driving defensively, etc. I'd heard all of it before, but it was nice that he cared about my safety, I suppose. There was one officer, however, who told me something I hadn't heard. He was an older gentleman, probably near retirement, and he hung near the edge of the group until everyone else was done with their stories, meant to scare me into making smarter choices. Then he said he'd take me to say hi to my uncle, who was at his desk, and he told me something strange on the way there. "There's a man that's wrapped in plastic in this city," he said. "He hangs out around the edge of the highway. If you see him, don't look at his face. He'll be mostly covered so you won't see it unless you really look." "If you can't see his face, how do you know it's a man?" I asked. I was a bit testy from being ambushed by all my uncle's co-workers, and was not in the mood to indulge ghost stories. "I guess I don't," he admitted, "but that's not important. Every now and then," he said, "they'd respond to an accident caused by a man covered in plastic. A motorist would spot a piece of trash by the side of the road, a big piece, standing upright, and it would be wrapped in just the way that it looked like a human figure. Just some stray debris, blown around by the wind. Initially, the police thought the resulting accidents, or near misses, that occurred were from the momentary distraction of trying to understand what they'd seen, but reports kept coming, and the trend was unmistakable. A human figure, swaddled in plastic, wrapped tight like the winding of a corpse. Even the head was covered. Everyone that saw it had crashed shortly after, or had a near miss. Everyone that saw the man's face died. I laughed a little and, thinking myself smart, asked how they knew seeing his face was the trigger, if all the people that saw it died shortly after. His jaw tightened, and something in me trembled, realizing that I'd asked something painful to him, a memory he tried to suppress. I began to think that maybe there was something to his story. He told me that he'd responded to an accident many years ago, The man driving had survived. His wife had not. The man was hysterical and the officer had tried to pull him away from the scene, tried to get him to go to the waiting ambulance. Anything to make him stop looking at his wife's crushed body. He remembered, amidst the man's babbling, that this was his fault, that he'd killed his wife. Untrue. But it was understandable that he'd blame himself, that the man had said he'd seen someone standing by the side of the road, and he'd glanced, only briefly. But his wife had turned in her chair to look back at him and see what the figure was doing. She'd started screaming. Screaming and screaming. Something about their face. How it was all wrong, and she had to get away from it, and she'd started clawing at the door, trying to open it. And that's when the vehicle in the other lane had swerved inexplicably and hit the passenger's side, killing his wife. "That's really fucked up," I said, when he was finished. And his lips narrowed into a thin line, and he told me I shouldn't swear like that. He didn't say anything else about the man in plastic. I asked my uncle about it later. He looked uncomfortable and shrugged, and told me it was true that they had a lot of reports about the man in plastic. "Just be careful," he said. "Don't be distracted by anything on the side of the road, whether mundane or some weird local ghost story." It's been many years since that talk, and the idea of a man wrapped in plastic stuck with me. I'm not superstitious. I figured there had to be a logical explanation, that maybe people were mistaken in what they saw, and the police were looking for a pattern that wasn't there. Well, if that's all there was to it, I wouldn't be posting. A few weeks ago I saw the man in plastic. It was exactly as the older police officer said. He was unremarkable, merely another piece of debris blown up against the barrier separating the two sides of the highway. I would have paid it no attention if it weren't for the curve of the shoulders, the line of the legs, unmistakably a human figure. Stale gray like an overcast sky, crinkled with musty light from the reflection of the plastic. I thought, at first, it was a man in a hoodie, inexplicably, dangerously, leaning on the barrier in the middle of the highway. Then, as my car approached, I realized that it was one solid piece covering him from head to toe. Like a funeral wrap, I thought, from the old tradition of winding the body in a sheet. My car drew even with where he stood. He shifted, his shoulders twisted, and he began to turn his head to me. I remember my uncle's warning. I tore my eyes away, just in time to see something fall from the vehicle in front of me. I thought, in that instant, that it was the washing machine that had fallen out of the back of the pickup. Later, after the police arrived, I realized it was something much bigger and more sturdy, which helped explain what happened to the car behind me. I swerved into the other lane. My uncle had told me to always keep track of where the other cars were, so that I knew where it was safe to maneuver to in an emergency. And I'd been doing that, and knew there were no cars riding along beside me. I missed the debris. The car that had been following perhaps a little too close behind was not so lucky. The front of his car clipped the machinery. I saw it turn sideways, spinning from the impact. Saw it roll. It came to a stop in the grass of the shoulder. I pulled over, braking as hard as I dared, fumbling for my cell phone with shaking hands. I called 911, gave them my location, and then, disoriented, and perhaps a little in shock, dropped the phone and went to go check on the other driver. The damage to his car was less than I expected. The frame was bent near the top of the driver's side door. The sides were dented, and the windshield was shattered. But that was all. He wasn't moving as I approached, and I honestly don't know why I kept going. "He's dead. He's dead," was all that was running through my mind. But then he raised his head and stared about him in confusion, reached up a hand and touched the shattered windshield in shock. Then I was there by the car, and unlocked the door, and I wrenched it open. He looked fine. There were no visible injuries. A laptop lay in the passenger side floor. "I saw his face," he whimpered at me. "I saw it." And then he wrapped his arms around his body and began to rock back and forth, and screamed. Long, plaintive, and when his lungs were empty, he sucked in another breath and began screaming again. I felt helpless. I tried to get him to stop. I grabbed his shoulder and tried to hold him against the seat, so he'd stop rocking, and he began to twist and thrash instead, moaning and weeping. So I let him go, and he just sat there and rocked and screamed, and wept about the face he'd seen. He did this until the ambulance arrived to take him away. I'd been having nightmares about this every night since it happened. About the accident, watching that car tumble, helpless to do anything. I dream about a man screaming and rocking, and I'm trying to get him to help, but he's always out of reach. And I dream about that man in plastic, and wake just before he turns to look at me, panting and shaking, and cold with sweat. I'm crying a lot. I get panicky when I see a pickup truck with anything in the back, and after I stop, I have to sit there for a moment, and catch my breath, and wait for my heart to slow down. This is all normal, I feel, considering what happened. I'm trying to work through it, to not let it keep me from doing something so vital as driving. I've got an appointment with a therapist scheduled for next week. I found out what happened to that man. I asked my uncle, and he came over to my house that evening. He sat down at my kitchen table while I made tea, and asked if I really wanted to know. And that was enough to indicate the news was not going to be good. I sat down opposite him and said that yes, I wanted to know. He died, my uncle told me. On the way to the hospital, he started growing more frantic and aggressive, screaming the same thing over and over again. The face was wrong. The face was wrong. Then he'd gone into a seizure and was dead before they reached the hospital. They believe the laptop that was in the passenger seat had struck him in the head when the car rolled, which caused bleeding in the brain. I thanked him, said maybe knowing would give me closure, and my uncle left. He seemed uncomfortable enough telling me that the man died, so I didn't want to worry him further by saying I had seen the man in plastic. You see, I'm encountering him everywhere now. I catch glimpses of debris on the side of the road. Dirty off-white sheets, shiny black tatters fluttering in the breeze, or stained gray scraps. And each time I can't help but look, only for a moment, just long enough to realize that it has taken the shape of a man. I look back at the road before he can turn his head, before I can see his face. I wonder, has he always been there, and I'm finally noticing? Or is he targeting me? Should I have died instead of the man in the car behind me? I don't know. But if you see something like a man standing at the side of the highway, don't look. Keep driving. Don't look for any longer than a second, in case he turns his head and you see his face. There's a road in my town called Rabbit's Run. In any other place, it would be cute and whimsical, but I try to avoid it at all costs. Year-round the street is plastered with roadkill. The road cuts through a thick forest on the edge of town, and is completely absent of streetlights. I hate driving it, but it's the quickest way to the highway that leads to my job. I try to give myself enough extra time to go the long way, but every now and then, I'm forced to take Rabbit's Run. There are signs posted at each end of the road, warning of deer crossing and animal crossings of all sort. But it does little to prevent the carnage. Late spring is always the worst. People in town have explained it away as mating season, getting the critters all worked up. Lately, I'm not so sure. I've had to drive through this stretch several nights this month. Each time, my headlights would illuminate the red clumps dotting the road, followed by the horrible crunch under my wheels. There are so many it's impossible to avoid them. The stench is even worse. I try to hold my breath, but never make it all the way through. The roadkill is mostly small animals, likely rabbits or squirrels, but larger corpses too, groundhogs or skunks maybe. It's hard to tell what they are at this point really. Sometimes there's even the odd crow that didn't fly away in time while feeding on the remains of some other unlucky critter. Oddly enough, I've never actually hit something that was still alive. I've only seen the mess after countless other cars must have smashed them to bits. That wasn't until last night. I made the turn onto Rabbit's Run a little after 10 p.m. while saying a little prayer that the street would be clear. At first things were fine. I did swerve around what looked like a raccoon, but other than that, the road was empty. The road winded through the roads before coming to a straightaway. The brush was thick on either side, stretching out into the shoulder. I slowed down despite my brain screaming to drive faster and get the hell out. I kept my eyes darting back and forth, ready to slam on the brakes at the first sign of movement. I noticed a shadow pass behind me, and looked into the rearview mirror. There was only the dark road behind me, no other cars that I could see. When I glanced back at the road, there was nothing I could do. Smack. I can't get this sound out of my head. It was awful. heavy and wet. The sound of someone crushing a million bugs, or maybe throwing them into a blender. I stomped down on the brake and tried to catch my breath. Whatever I hit was big, maybe 4 feet tall. All I could think of was that it was someone's kid, that I had just become a murderer and ruined a family's life forever. I reached for my phone to dial 911, but paused. It could have been anything really, maybe a small deer. I had to know for certain before confessing to manslaughter. I clicked the flashlight app on my phone and exited the car. A smear of red flowed backwards from my wheels. I followed it with the light to where the body was surely lying. I gasped. There wasn't a body, there were bodies. 10 or so small round clumps of meat and hair and bone. The biggest clump looked like it might have been a possum or something. It seemed to have a tail of sorts. But there was nothing that could have been standing 4 feet tall. Were my eyes playing tricks on me? I took a step closer, covering my mouth to avoid the horrible, rotten stench of the carnage. Flies were already buzzing around the mess. It looked as if it had been there for days. I shone the light to the side of the road, thinking maybe something crawled away. But there wasn't any sign of it. I breathed a sigh of relief and began walking back to my car. But I stopped when I heard a strange sound. A kind of plop, plop, plop. Like a leaky faucet. I shone my light and saw one of the clumps was pulsing. I thought I was imagining it, but it didn't stop. It kept moving up and down, like a beating heart. I wanted to run, but I must have been in shock. Finally, I started to back away, my shoes shuffling against the gravel on the pavement. I bumped into the back of my car when the thing burst open, spraying bits of flesh across the road. I jumped in my car and raced home. I wasn't able to sleep at all last night, and I'm still trying to process what I saw. Whatever I hit, it definitely wasn't an animal. As far as occurrences, and stories go, for that matter, this is the most horror-inducing one that you'll come across. I mean, it's about coffee, so how frightening can it be? Still, it's a bit disturbing. For the past 2 weeks, since I moved here basically, I wake up every single morning to a freshly brewed pot of coffee, and my favorite mug filled to the brim with it. Every morning, the pot and my mug will be sat on my counter, visible from the stairs as I came down to wake myself up with some caffeine. It doesn't sound that weird, except that I live alone. I bought this property, which is just outside of LA, for a steal, so I didn't need roommates or a spouse to help me out. Now I'm wondering if I made the right decision purchasing the property. Maybe I was too hasty, trying to jump on a good thing, but I'm stuck here now and things are escalating. So I'm hoping that some of you can help me figure out what's going on. So I'm going to tell you everything I know, which, unfortunately, isn't much. I wasn't looking to move into a house, but my real estate broker mentioned this place to me. It used to be a horse farm, but something happened and the original owners of the land left in the 1940s. Since then, owners have moved in and out, no one staying for more than 5 years. The price of the land and the house was extremely low. I work as a freelance illustrator from home, and while I make a good amount of money for me, I didn't think I would be able to own 49 acres of land and a big house at the age of 27, you know? I did some remodeling before moving into the house. The previous owners bought the land but never lived on the property. They just held on to it, letting the house pretty much go to waste. There are rumors in town that their little girl had something happen to her, the one and only time she was on the property. But no one will tell me any more than that. I was going to do the renovations myself. I like being crafty, but as a surprise gift, my family and my best friends pulled enough money together to get the biggest projects done, including the flooring. It had been covered in some weird black goop. I just couldn't get off the floors, no matter how hard I tried. It took me all day to get moved in, so I was pretty tired the first day that I spent in the house. I ate a microwave meal and went to bed pretty early, around 11 p.m. I wake up at around 8 a.m. to the sweet smell of coffee, which should have been a red flag as soon as I woke up. But I'm a zombie before I have any coffee, so I didn't think too much of it. I was walking downstairs to the kitchen when, about halfway down, I could see my favorite mug sitting on the kitchen island. I walked up to see that it was full of coffee. Then I turned to see that there was an entire carafe was sitting right next to it. This wouldn't have been a problem except for two things. One, as I said before, I live alone. No one was staying with me, not even family. I prefer my solitude and I like spending the first night in a new place by myself. Second, I do not have an electronic coffee machine or a smart coffee machine. The only way I make coffee in my house is a French press. If you've never seen one before, it's basically a glass carafe with a plunger mechanism. Is that the right words for it? Who knows? That pushes the coffee grinds to the bottom of the carafe, so no grounds end up in the coffee cup. It does not require electricity and has no mechanical parts to it. It's just a glass container and a plunger. I'll be honest, at first, I thought that I had gotten up in the morning half asleep, went downstairs, made my coffee, then went back upstairs and fell asleep for a few minutes before fully waking up. I mean, that makes the most sense, right? Except that it kept happening every morning. It didn't seem to matter when I got up, or had to get up for meetings, or what time I went to sleep. It didn't matter if my favorite mug was dirty or in the dishwasher when I went to sleep. Every morning, in the same place, would be the French press carafe and my favorite mug filled with coffee. I tried everything to figure out what was happening with the damn coffee in the morning. I got the locks on my house changed. Coffee still happened. I asked my friends to stay with me. Coffee still happened. I locked away my French press in my office. Coffee still happened. Then one of my girlfriends, Bree, mentioned that I might try using a camera to check out what was happening in the kitchen. I was against it at first. I'm the type of person who would rather not know if someone was creeping into my house or there are ghosts. I don't want to know. Knowing just makes it worse. But she kept insisting, so I bought one and set it up. It took me up until yesterday to check the footage because I was so creeped out. So Bree came over and checked it with me. There's nothing here. Bree said when we watched back the footage, she scrubbed the entire footage, except? I perked up hearing it, thinking maybe she caught someone trying to be a ninja in my kitchen. Well, listen, she said, handing me the headphones she was wearing to look at the footage. I checked the time on the camera, and it read 3 a.m. And I mean, listen close. It's faint, but there's something definitely there. I put the headphones on and listened. At first I heard nothing, just the sounds of the house. Then, about 20 seconds later, I could hear it. It was faint, but it seemed to be getting closer. A lullaby. An old one. Hummed by a feminine voice. It was low and spread out like a ribbon floating in the wind. It would go in and out of earshot. Okay, it sounds like a lullaby, I said, looking at Bree. Yeah, but who's humming it? At 3 a.m.? You're asleep. She had a point there. And look at this. She took the laptop back and scrubbed to the end of the footage, right before I woke up. This is 5 minutes before you wake up. Watch the counter. I had placed the camera on top of my fridge to overlook the kitchen counter, since that's where the coffee showed up. Everything seemed fine and then, there it was. Static. It lasted less than a second, but from the time the static stopped and started, the kitchen counter magically had the coffee prepared for me. 2 minutes later, it showed up in the kitchen. The footage ends with me picking up the camera and turning it off. Girl, you got a ghost, Bree said, sighing. She laughed at the look of my face and shrugged. Come on, this camera doesn't do static, you know that. But there's static and then magically there's coffee? It's a ghost. It's gotta be. Maybe, I said. I've always been interested in ghosts, but I never wanted them around me. Thinking there was one in my house was something that I wasn't willing to entertain. Until this morning. Because this morning, it was a little different. My coffee cup was still on the kitchen counter, but the French press was smashed on the floor. I nearly cut my foot on a piece of glass. Once I got that cleaned up, I took a look at the coffee cup. I was expecting coffee, but instead, I found the same black goo that I found on my floors when I first bought the house. Next to it, on my once clean kitchen counter read the words, "I thought we were friends." I don't know what this means. I'm creeped out, but also really curious. Who wrote the words? Where did the black goo come from? And who the hell is humming a lullaby in my house when I'm asleep? I'm writing this from my hotel room, so I won't know what's going on with the house for another couple months. I'm on a long assignment out of the country for one of my clients, so whatever's going on will happen without me. Still, I'm wondering if any of you have any suggestions, or answers, or even some advice. I won't be home until early next year, but I'd like to have some sort of game plan before I arrive. For now, the house is being looked after by Bree, who volunteered for some reason. She's great at getting to the bottom of things, but I'm hoping that whatever's going on will go away by itself. I don't need the house to be haunted. I just want everything to be normal. The following entries were taken from an old journal found along the Yukon River in February 1905. All attempts to locate the animal described in the journal have been unsuccessful. Until further noticed, the following entries are said to be the product of severe hallucinations. Monday, December 8th. I'm heading back out to the hunting cabin near the Tatanduke River, as usual to see if I can catch some game for the rest of winter. My folks back home are seriously counting on me to carry them through this awful season, and I don't want to disappoint. The cabin is a cozy little thing with 2 rooms, a food cache, an outhouse, and an old wood pile out back. The surrounding woods are ominous and suffocating when you're out there alone. The trees prevent the moon from casting its glow through on the property, giving me nothing but a flimsy lantern to light my way in the darkness. In the end, the grueling trip is still worth it for the plentiful abundance of animals taking up residence in that area. Hopefully my cabin didn't take that much of a beating while I was gone. Tuesday, December 9th. My fears have been confirmed, unfortunately. The cabin has fallen into disarray since last year. Suits me right for leaving it to the elements, I suppose. The wood on the floor is rotting due to small holes on the roof, caused by the boards on top likely being blown off by a storm. Vold droppings have covered the floor, like a foul carpet, and the lamp is busted. Good thing I brought a second one, huh? There's a large piece of the left wall's window that's been smashed in. It looks like some animals got to the cache. Though there wasn't much left in there besides scraps. Not exactly much to get you through the season. I'll have to postpone hunting for today and start making repairs immediately. I can patch that hole up with some caribou pelts, but I doubt it will do much. That's all I've got. The snow here leaves a violent sting on your skin, and seems to blow more harshly as the day goes by. I can't do a month out here without patching those holes in the roof either. So best get to it. Wednesday, December 10th. I found something in the woods today. I was setting a large system of traps going in a straight line from the back of the cabin to the woods. Usually I only go as far as the old tree stump, so I don't lead bears back to the cabin. But coin is short this year, and I'm incredibly desperate. It was only about 20 minutes of walking after crossing the stump boundary when the thing caught my eye. It looked like a shrine. To whom or what, I don't know. It sure as hell wasn't made by the Athabascans, and they're the only dominant tribe Yukon country. The shrine consisted of a mound of rubble with a mobile-like structure situated right in the center. The rocks had strange symbols scratched on their surfaces. What was truly bizarre, well, more demented than anything else, was the structure in the center. The main trunk was a shaved log, with what must have been dried animal blood smeared all over in messy patterns. On top of the slim tree trunk were 4 perfectly straight branches in the shape of a cross. They spunk counterclockwise, gently in the cold breeze of the frozen forest, and the dried grass bundles with singed tips jutting out from each end danced as the wind seeped through it. From the above branches hung a multitude of bones and skulls from all different kinds of animals. Raccoons, birds, foxes, weasels, muskrats, and I think I might have seen a bear cub skull in there as well. Whoever made this thing is sick, and I hope they're long gone. Thursday, December 11th. Great news. I managed to catch 13 snowshoe hare in the span of one day. Their fur and meat don't sell for much on their own, but the sheer quantity of them will for sure fill the yearly quota. Maybe even go past it. Finally a good day out in this godforsaken forest. If the game meat keeps coming in at this rate, for all the next week, we'll be rich. I had a dream about the shrine last night. I don't want to talk about it. Friday, December 12th. I'm being stalked. I don't know by who or what, but I know they're nearby. I woke up this morning with an unbearable pain in my right calf, and when I went to check, I found a deep cut slinking into the muscle. The way the wound is shaped makes it look like the work of a large knife, but I can't be sure. I ran outside barely dressed to find drops of my blood trailing back to the goddamn shrine. Not only that, but the clearing around the cabin has been completely trashed. Pots and pans strewn everywhere the eye can see, and the wood pile is mostly gone. The cowards snatched the catches too. Either I carve this bastard's balls off when I catch him, or I get the hell out of here before he does something drastic. Saturday, December 13th. I set up 4 big traps all around the clearing, and covered them with leaf litter to see if my unwanted guests would fall for it. But no such luck. 2 of the traps have been triggered. Whoever it was broke free with ease. That's only the half of it though. I found 6 of the animal bones from the shrine scattered near the cabin's front door. Then when I went to the side of the building, I was greeted with a massive symbol that looked like an eye painted over the log wall. Whoever this isn't just a madman. They're a fanatic. Sunday, December 14th. Is the one who stalks me the same individual who constructed that grotesque shrine near my property? Why haven't I been able to draw the conclusion until now? If it really is him, why hasn't he attacked yet? The bolt lock on the cabin's door is anything but sturdy. A good hard kick would be enough to knock the sucker flat on the wood floor. That's and I'm quite the deep sleeper. In other words, I'm a sitting duck. He could have waltzed inside and slit my throat at any time in the previous nights. He knows I have a rifle on me, but I think he also knows I'm scared stiff. It might be time for me to just jump ship. If I can't even catch a glimpse of the person tomorrow, I'll leave the first thing Tuesday morning. Monday, December 15th. I can't stay here anymore. I try not to sleep, but I can't help it. I'm just so tired and exhausted. Every time I drift off, my mind descends into another nightmare about the shrine. Each one is more horrifying than the last. I can only recall one. I was standing in front of the shrine again, but it was taller. As if the intruder took the time to build another 10 feet while I cowered in the cabin. The animal skulls were now replaced with rotting corpses. Those corpses were screaming. God, it was awful. They shrieked, sobbed, and begged just like people would. I could see their little lungs trying to work through their chest cavities, and their terror-stricken eyes stared right into mine. The surrounded forest was blanketed by a blood-red mist, and the moon above shone a bright emerald green. It looked as if the light it created was slowly drizzling down towards the earth. Each time I wake up, I can hear something loud echoing outside the cabin. It sounds like howling. Tuesday, December 16th. My God, I saw him. No, not him. It wasn't human by any stretch of the imagination. That thing does not belong in our reality. I want so bad to believe that a kind and loving God would not allow a horrific abomination such as that monster to walk the earth alongside us. And that what I witnessed was nothing more than the product of another dream. But no, what I saw was very, very real. That I know now. Sometime not long after midnight, I awoke in a puddle of my own sweat to the sound of harsh squealing coming from the back of the cabin. I don't know what possessed me to think that investigation of the sound was an even remotely good idea, and no amount of repression will ever take back what I saw. I trudged slowly through the ankle-deep layer of snow towards the tree line with my rifle, shone my lantern into the dark green pines, and there it was. It was in the middle of eating a marten. I will never be able to forget the poor thing's face. Its beady little eyes leaked mortal fear that I felt at the same time with every fiber of my being, and its small mouth stretched open painfully in an agonizing scream of protest. It was still alive despite missing a chunk of its body. Each time the creature bit down or sunk its black claws deeper into its form, it writhed and cried in a futile attempt to break free and save itself from the agony. Before it could scream again, the thing snuffed out its short life by clamping down on its neck with hooked needle teeth and wrenched upwards in a quick motion. The following fountain of blood stained the snow, and the creature lapped up as much as it could. On instinct, I sucked in a large breath and cocked the rifle. That was the biggest mistake I think I've ever made. It immediately dropped what was left of its meal, and its head snapped backward with a sickening crack to meet mine. It looked like something out of a campfire tale. The first thing I saw were those eyes. Those giant, bulbous insect eyes, with dazzling white pupils made me feel so small. His form was gnarly, emaciated even. Bluish white skin stuck to its bones, face, and rib cage like paper mache. Another one of those symbols was carved deeply into its forehead. Its mouth was impossibly large. The lower jaw extended down towards its chest, where it split down the middle. Each side of the lower jaw moved independently from the other. When it saw me, the lower jaw spread to the sides to reveal a long, black tongue slithering out of its throat. The tongue flicked in the air as if tasting the harsh winds. The thing itself didn't seem to react to the cold at all. Perhaps the most atrocious detail was its arms. Not its main arms, the extra ones. 2 pink, fleshy appendages sprouted out of his open intestinal cavity and dug into the 2 nearby trees, so deep they caused the bark to splinter. There were no fingers to speak of, only curved hooks like those of a spider. They sent a vile fluid oozing down the tree's trunks. The thing's true arms must have stretched all the way down to its ankles. Each finger was tipped with shiny black talons, still caked in the marten's insides. The moment it laid its eyes on me, its pupils dilated so large they took up most of its 2 massive eyes. I think I even saw it smile. This was no involuntary reaction to the sudden light. Those eyes were wild with excitement. The moment the rest of its body cracked forward, to realign with the head, I screamed and made a mad dash for the boat. The winter can have the stupid cabin for all I care. I just don't want to die out here, especially not to that thing. Saturday, December 20th. It's still following me, even as I write. I've been stuck on this tiny boat for 4 bloody days now, and it still hasn't given up. How the hell does it know where I'm at all times? It doesn't matter how far I continue to drift down the river. Every single time I glance to the sides of the winding Yukon, I see those eyes staring at me from behind the thick underbrush of alder and willow. Those horrible eyes are filled with a mad desire to consume. I'm never going to make it back to Eagle. I will never see my family again. Sometimes I wonder how the thing will do it. Will it open me up and spill my guts to the snow with its mini limbs? Or will it crush my head like an egg between its gaping, mandible jaws? I hope somebody finds this. People, other hunters, settlers, and their loved ones need to know that Yukon country is no longer safe. We don't own this land. It does. Mr. Axton's boats and supplies were found beached on an embankment near Tacoma Bluff on December 25th. The diary from which these entries were recorded was returned to Mr. Axton's family in Eagle on the 29th. Multiple search parties combed the Tacoma and nearby areas during the following 3 weeks, but no trace of the man was discovered. Mr. Axton's fate remains unsolved.